So Fortis was making us make timelines of that day.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. At times the trial of Michelle Troconis feels like one of those monster puzzles, you know, one of those 8,000 piece mega puzzles. Have you ever done one of them? And the prosecution seems to be painstakingly putting those pieces together. Obviously, this is a time-consuming and some might say tedious process, which is why Troconis' defense lawyer hasn't wasted a single opportunity to bleat about evidence relating to photos having no relevance to his client.
This is really the trial of DULOS.
Of course, the reality is, in order for the prosecution to make their case, because DULOS has never been tried in court, that's kind of got to take place now. It's kind of two trials in one. And so it absolutely is relevant to his client. He can say that it isn't, but it is. And although it does take time and it is relevant, it's going to take time for the puzzle pieces to show the full picture. Are the jury going to be able to maintain concentration? Now, in the last two trial days, the prosecution's picture has suddenly begun to take shape. It's sharpened quite considerably. In four important areas, we've learned how Mishi may not be the completely innocent bystander Shoehorn suggests she is. But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Bear in mind, I'll be covering the day, is it 21, starting at 3 p.m. Eastern, so look out for that. If you're enjoying this analysis, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So, number one, the alibi staging is even more elaborate than we thought. And so what we have isn't just the alibi scripts, there's also something else, and it's point 23 in the affidavit. Incoming phone call from Andreas TCRS. DULOS' phone records show an incoming call to his cell phone on the 24th of May at 8:24 a.m. And of course he was in the thick of committing the crime at this time. The affidavit notes that this call was pre-arranged by DULOS the previous day with his friend Andreas Tutsiaridis, who lives in Greece. And, you know, I don't think Andreas knew exactly what he was doing or what his role was in the same way Pavel probably didn't know. But it just shows you how scaly DULOS is. According to interview number one, the incoming call from Andreas was not mentioned by Troconis during the first interview. And who do you think took that call? Who do you think took that call on DULOS' phone? Interview two, Troconis did not discuss the call from Greece during this interview either. She continued to claim no knowledge that DULOS did not have his cell phone that day. Now, that is quite an important thing to forget about. You know, she's been interviewed twice by the police. Maybe you should mention something like this. And then, of course, during the third interview, her statement changed. In this interview, Troconis changed her entire story regarding the presence or absence of DULOS' cell phone that day by acknowledging DULOS' cell phone was sitting on the four-group office as she and Kent Mawini stood in the office, and that it received an incoming call on that date. And her narrative surrounding this call is quite fascinating. These are her words. She said, the phone rang and it was a call from, well, it said Andreas, and Kent stood up. According to Troconis, Mawini motioned for her to answer the cell phone. Now, do you think that is true? Because she says it was from, and then she said, somebody said, you must take the call. Anyway, in answering a question from attorney Bauman, Troconis responded, he, meaning Mawini, said, like, there's a phone ringing. Are you going to do something with the phone or the call? and I picked up the phone. Troconis stated she knew TCRS, a childhood friend of DULOS who lives in Greece, but that she was not sure if it was TCRS calling. Troconis also indicated she heard static when she answered the cell phone, and that it was difficult to hear. Troconis reported that she then heard the Greek word for hello, and she responded hola, the Spanish word for hello. Troconis explained that the call was short and lasted only a few seconds before ending. And I mean, that was all that was needed, just a short call to log on the phone, and, that is what is going to be in the cell data review, and not much else, but that is what is needed. DULOS' cell phone data showed a 17-second phone call. Troconis said, and I'm pretty sure it was Andreas's voice. Troconis indicated there was no follow-up phone call, and that soon after the call she left the office, leaving DULOS' cell phone sitting on the table. Now I must say, I do wonder whether, if this person had made a legitimate call, you would have imagined that he would call again to talk about whatever he wanted to talk about. And so the absence of him calling again, I think, is possibly evidence of a sort, isn't it? Number 2, Mishy's own alibi is in doubt. Now, according to the affidavit, during her initial interview, her first interview, Troconis made the following claims. Now, this is important because it's to do with her own alibi. Does she have a fixed, solid, believable, credible story regarding her movements on the 24th of May? According to the affidavit, Mishy left Jefferson Crossing on the 24th of May at about 9:10, right after taking that call, and then dropped off an item to a friend, thereby providing herself with an in-person alibi before travelling north to the Simsbury Stop and Shop, where she took photographs of herself and a store robot, providing a secondary alibi. Now, already that is quite weird. It's almost like she knows she needs an alibi. So first of all, she goes to someone, gets an alibi that way, then also, like Chris Watts, goes somewhere and then actually takes photos. Remember, he took photos of flowers. On her way home, Troconis stopped by an additional address in West Simsbury, where she met with a different friend, providing a third alibi. Now, all of that seems aimed at saying, I didn't kill Jennifer DULOS, right? And I think that is true. She does have an alibi, but it's a little bit of a unconventional alibi. It includes selfies and kind of running around in a way that doesn't seem absolutely necessary. I mean, she's not just at the office working. When asked if DULOS was home on the morning of the 24th of May, Troconis responded by telling detectives that her locations were substantiated by photographs and text on her cell phone. She did not answer the actual question asked. Now, if you think about that, she's asked where was Fotis? And instead of saying where he was, she says where she was. Is that a sign of guilty knowledge? What do you think? Then, in terms of her own alibi, in interview 2, without prompting, Troconis provided a description of the clothing she was wearing at the Simsbury Stop and Shop to help investigators identify her on store surveillance. Then in interview 3, detectives continued to question Troconis about the alibi scripts which Troconis admitted having written with DULOS, although she appeared to deflect more of the onus for writing the document onto DULOS. I mean, it could be, remember, she is someone who is on television, someone who probably writes scripts for her own, her own use. I'm right now referring to a script as I'm reading this. And so whose idea do you think it was? She's saying that it was his idea. Investigators pointed out that he wrote notes for Mishy which were false. Troconis grudgingly admitted that portions of the alibi scripts were factually inaccurate and that she had, nevertheless, provided these falsehoods to police as facts. Number 3, when did DULOS get back? Troconis had lunch with DULOS on the 24th of May, but she was inconsistent about this. When she was questioned about DULOS' arrival for their lunch together, during interview 1, she said that She returned to Jefferson Crossing at about 12 o'clock. She stated the Ford Raptor was not on the property because Gumeni was driving it. Troconis stated the four-group Chevrolet Suburban, however, was there. Detectives asked Troconis if anyone else was at the house at noon. She responded, "I had lunch with Fotis, but later, not immediately." Detectives asked Troconis to be clear if Fotis was home when Troconis returned to the house as late as noon. Troconis responded, "He probably can be because he has the office on top. I mean, I didn't look for him." Troconis reported a different time frame for the lunch she ate with DULOS on the 24th of May. In interview 1, Troconis first reported 1 p.m. And in the same interview, she then changed the time from 1 p.m. to between 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. Then in interview 2, she said it was sometime prior to 1 p.m. In interview 3, she said between noon and 1:30 p.m. In the alibi scripts, she said they had lunch between noon and 1 p.m. Surveillance shows the Toyota Tacoma pulling into 80 Mountain Spring Road at 12:25 p.m. In other words, it actually arrived much earlier than she's suggesting, which makes one wonder, what did they actually do together on that property? Remember, this is barely 2 hours after Jennifer DULOS was murdered. What was happening after this period? During her second interview, Troconis explained that when DULOS returned home for lunch that day, he was wearing jeans and a light shirt with short sleeves, similar to polo, whereas during the third interview, Troconis claimed DULOS was wearing a collared button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up and that he appeared normal. However, in the third interview, Troconis admitted she could not account for DULOS' whereabouts on the morning of the 24th of May. When asked if she could confirm DULOS' whereabouts, she acknowledged she could not. Troconis claimed that she had not found it unusual for DULOS to have absolutely no contact with her during the entire morning. She claimed on some days they speak 20 times, while on other days they had no contact at all. And that brings us to point number 4. When was Jennifer's body disposed of and where? And this question really addresses, was Michelle present when Fotis was potentially doing that? And also, was it potentially done at a property where they were both present, namely 80 Mountain Spring Road? Now, point number 26 from the affidavit reads, the property located at 80 Mountain Spring Road is a large, isolated property owned by the Four Group and includes a massive 11,000 plus square foot mansion with 5 bedrooms. Bear in mind, the Ramsey home is about 7,000 square feet. This is almost double that size. 5 full and 3 half bathrooms situated on a 5.08 acre lot. The location is a 5-minute, 2.1 mile drive from Fort Jefferson Crossing. Throughout her 3 interviews, Troconis provided vastly differing accounts, all of which conflicted with location data gleaned from DULOS and Troconis' cell phones. So she's saying they were at A, B, and C, but the cell phone data shows they were at Q, P, and Z. Interview 1, in her initial interview, Troconis provided the following information. Troconis reported DULOS called her on her phone to tell her they both had to go over to 80 Mountain Spring Road to clean the house in preparation for a client meeting the next morning. She described it as common for them to use their cell phones to call one another. Troconis had to bring a vacuum cleaner, and this is really interesting, a vacuum, a Swiffer mop, paper towels, Clorox spray, and garbage bags. And what that's telling you is she was busy with a major cleaning operation at 80 Mountain Spring Road on the day of the murder. And that's what she's doing. She's doing a major cleaning thing. Troconis reported that she and DULOS drove the 2.1 miles south to 80 Mountain Spring Road in separate vehicles sometime between 2:15 and 3 p.m. However, residential surveillance shows DULOS driving his 2015 Chevrolet Suburban, followed by Troconis driving a 2014 Jeep Cherokee at 80 Mountain Spring Road at 1:36 p.m. So basically, she's off by about 40 minutes in her timing. Soon after arriving, Troconis reported she discovered the vacuum she had brought did not work. She explained how she returned to Jefferson Crossing to obtain a small broom. And you quite often see this in true crime. Someone is doing something perhaps criminal, but in their own story they describe it as doing something and then forgetting something, or opening a door only to close it. Basically, a lot of running around that doesn't amount to any urgency and not really achieving anything. In order to clarify her story, detectives asked Troconis what she first saw when she drove into the driveway of 80 Mountain Spring Road. She reported seeing the Suburban already parked with DULOS standing inside the south garage bay. Troconis indicated that at about 3 p.m. she returned to Jefferson Crossing. She explained the way the Jeep was parked, it was easier to drive the Suburban. Troconis reported she went back to 80 Mountain Spring Road between 3:40 and 4 p.m. When she arrived, she observed DULOS talking on his phone out in the area of the driveway where the cars are parked. Troconis began cleaning windows but then gave up because she realized the house was too big. So she goes there, apparently finds that something doesn't work, goes back to clean windows, doesn't do that either. So that is quite suspicious. In interview 2, Troconis continued to claim she did not know what DULOS was doing on the property. When Troconis was told that DULOS had killed his wife and involved her in the cleanup, she responded by saying, "That's like even worse. I hate him because of that." Affian Kimball told Troconis, "He got you in trouble." Troconis replied, "But I was cleaning the house. I wasn't cleaning Jennifer." During her third interview, Troconis provided some entirely new information. During interview 1 and 2, Troconis repeatedly told investigators she had been cleaning windows while at 80 Mountain Spring Road. During her third interview, Troconis began claiming she had been cleaning bathrooms. Troconis also indicated that when Gumeni arrived at 80 Mountain Spring Road at about 5 p.m., she and DULOS had been standing up against the Toyota Tacoma's passenger side. Fotis and I were against the car. Fotis was like behind me, like physical contact. Pavel arrives. I think Pavel or Fotis says, "I didn't see anything," or "we weren't doing anything." I think something like a joke. When asked to explain her meaning, and Troconis answered like, "Yeah, we were making," Troconis appeared to be saying that Gumeni's arrival interrupted DULOS and Troconis from engaging in sex alongside the passenger side of the Toyota. Do you believe that? This is quite important because you have a third party arriving and he seems to witness them looking surprised. What had they just been doing? Troconis told investigators that she was inside 80 Mountain Spring Road when DULOS came inside looking for paper towels because he had spilled something in the Toyota Tacoma. Well, we've dealt with that. In all 3 interviews, Troconis described how she repeatedly drove back and forth between 80 Mountain Spring Road and 4 Jefferson Crossing using both the Jeep and the Suburban. The timing she provided is not corroborated by the cellular data of Troconis's and DULOS' cell phones. That's important. Now, she was saying a lot of the time that I was there, I wasn't there because I was driving back and forth. Well, that's not corroborated. How serious is this problem? DULOS appears to remain at 80 Mountain Spring Road from about 1:36 p.m. until about 4:07 p.m., about 2.5 hours. What could have taken place during that period? Once upon a time, I remember a defense attorney saying if his client is caught in a lie even once, that could cost him everything. How many times has Mishi been caught telling tall tales? I'm not going to take it further than that. I'll see you guys tomorrow for Trial Day 21. Take care, and I'll see you guys next time.